This is a video I've been trying to do for a while. What it is that I've always wanted to do my own theory on what is going on in Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, but not what it represents because that's been done to death. Basically, and I haven't seen theory videos for the last one yet. I have watched the last one. Um Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared is basically a critique of mainly children's media or media targeting children because of the aesthetic of it. It seems to lean towards that, which makes perfect sense, and it deals with a lot of the issues that would be in a show like that. But everyone's talked about that and all the little Easter eggs that point to it. But here's the thing, there's clearly a more superficial, overarching plot as well, but nobody really talks about that, and I think that's kind of a shame because it's an interesting story. Um, what I mean by this is there seems to be, like, aside from the deeper meaning, the actual story itself. In this case, it's. Well, I'm gonna get into it. Basically, this is a theory video of what the superficial plot is. Of the entire series. Because people don't really discuss it. Like June 19th, people say, oh, it represents this day or this day in the real world. It's like, well, maybe it's just that's the day this whole thing happens. I am not going to include like the Kickstarter videos or some of the promo videos because I don't know 100% if they are canon. Now, interestingly, this didn't end with a party like everyone thought, but it did end with something I thought was going to happen, and I'll get into that. Um, Basically, my theory is this was, since it's over, a children's show on TV that focused on what is essentially these three characters that lived in the house together. Um, and they would teach lessons. Basically, they would teach various things during the course of the episode, and it would be like little tiny quick episodes, about 6, I'm guessing, that would take place over the course of the day. The morning lesson, the mid morning lesson, the afternoon lesson, the evening lesson, um, the late afternoon lesson, the dinner lesson, and then the bedtime lesson. Um, and these three characters would live in the house together. The sixth episode fully illustrated that with the 3 beds in the bedroom. Although, obviously, in the 6th episode, there are 2 characters missing, and one of them doesn't come back. One of them is dead. And that would be the bird. The bird does not really make an appearance at all, except as like a little hand puppet in an alternate universe the red guy escaped to, and I'll get into that. It's just. So basically, they're in a television world. Now, something is going wrong here. Like, maybe the ratings are dropping, or maybe the audience, like, something is deteriorating the reality, and we are basically seeing the last day of this universe. This universe is basically getting destroyed, and that last day happens to be June 19th, interestingly enough. And yes, I'm well aware June 19th was Father's Day, so nice little coincidence. So this could have was supposed to be a Father's Day episode. What I think the setup of the show is that the boy, the yellow character who's in the middle of the screen here floating around, he's living with 2 adopted siblings and technically his father, but his father's not a major character comparatively. Roy, the older looking yellow puppet, is the father figure in the show, but he's also the creator, and that's his actual son, so the show centers around the son, which is why the son is basically the last one to go, essentially. While the bird is probably a grandfather figure or an uncle that's a bit more elderly, and the red guy's a bit like an adult older brother, like a college age older brother who's living at home because it's cheaper or something and is helping around the house. There is no mother figure. We're going to go with the Disney syndrome here with this. So that would be one thing of it. And I should point out this is probably my most elaborate version of this particular theory of what the show actually was before this deterioration we are seeing. Now, the show usually starts with the three puppets. I guess the dad goes to work, sitting around the table when the Notebook pops up. Now, the Notebook popping up, this is what usually happens. This is the format of the show. They're sitting around the table, but this time they're quiet. Normally they'd be talking about something. Say they were going to do a good sportsmanship lesson in this, as an example of something they didn't do in the actual Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. Say the red guy would say, oh, I got a college sports game in today, and I really hope I win. I'm going to be very upset if I lose. Something to that effect. And one of the other characters would start talking about, well, no, you shouldn't worry about that. And something related to it, like, say, the red guy's baseball glove pops up, starts singing about good sportsmanship, and it's usually a happy, fun time, and it's perfectly normal. But here, they're not talking about anything. They didn't start talking about anything, and the notepad pops up and just starts singing about creativity. But, the characters think, oh, this normally happens, so they just kind of acknowledge its existence and goes along with it. But the red guy is like, this is boring, which would what he'd normally do. Like, he's the adult. And the uncle wouldn't get it. The bird wouldn't get it. The grandfatherly figure. But it starts getting twisted, and this is where the commentary about, our world comes in, but here it's not normally like that. The creative notebook would just let she would normally be proud of the boy painting the clown picture right away, going, that's very good, you're expressing your creativity. And she would never say something like green isn't a creative color. Instead, she critiques them in such a negative, uncreative way that you start to see something is wrong, and things start going haywire for, say, the dance number, for when they're showing they're creative and they're doing things that aren't really appropriate. But then everything resets like it would normally. So it's just brushed off as not a big deal, and the three decide to go watch TV. They have a show they like to watch. That normally would be like the next segment. It'd be this little mini show showing the next lesson, essentially, which would probably be normally something science or history related. So what would happen is they would be watching it. They would not be involved in this particular segment. But, they're talking about, oh, we're waiting for our show, and something would pop on, and, that would be it. Instead, another teacher pops up, which isn't supposed to happen. This is the clock. This is the time episode. And they end up being the show that they're supposed to be watching in the end. Because then he comes back and everything is reset with a few little differences here and there to show that it kind of did, kind of didn't happen. And again, the puppets are like, well, that was weird, but alright, let's just go to lunch. So they go out and they have a nice picnic. A little boy's starting to get a little affected by this because he's kind of freaking out. This is also one of the few times we see the dad. But we're seeing the dad doing more negative adult things. Normally, if the dad pops up, he's doing something like actually working in an office or taking his son fishing. Something positive, but something has warped. And he's just creepy now. Like, something is going wrong. Something with him is being directly affected by what's going on in the universe. And he starts becoming this omnipresent figure because he's, again, also the creator of the show. So he knows something and he's starting to be affected by it. Like, he's interconnected with this world. So this is kind of a mini apocalypse in a sense that's happening. So the picnic happens, and this is like the world's last attempt of gaining normalcy. The reason I say this is because something like they have this disgusting lunch. Normally it'd be things you'd see on a kid's show, like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And if the little one runs off on his own, the other two would be looking for him. And pardon me for the burp, by the way. But the little boy, runs off upset because the elder figure smashed a butterfly, which is something the elder figure would not do in these shows normally. Normally, he'd talk about how you're really not supposed to do that. So the little boy runs off, and this strange butterfly figure comes along and starts talking about love and trying to induct him into this cult. Basically trying to change the show into something else. Like, the show is trying to change itself into something else to try to revitalize itself into, like, more of a Christian show or something like that. But that ends up getting thwarted. Whatever is destroying this universe makes this into a dream, essentially. And the boy wakes up and realizes, everything's fine. I'm with my friends. Let's just go home, basically. So they go home, and now there's a switch up of the teachers, because it's supposed to be the Globe teaching them about geography this day. Like, that's actually scheduled. That's why they're like, I wonder who can show us blah, 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 blah. And the Globe turns around to sing. The Globe is supposed to do this, but the computer takes over. Meaning, something is, like, whatever is unraveling is starting to unravel more. And every time things start going haywire at the end of the episode or something, it's just more and more of this world unraveling, de-threading, and just falling far, far, far down the rabbit hole into essentially nothingness. And they enter this digital world, and they're thinking, well, okay, the teacher switched, but so far things seem not okay, but a little better than they have been the past 3 times. Like, we're not getting gored or anything. Because the teacher does go completely ignores everything, and the other teachers didn't really do that. Like, they'd be dismissive, but they wouldn't talk over, and they wouldn't completely not acknowledge the puppets' questions. They would either kind of sidestep them or answer them in an odd way, but they wouldn't completely ignore them. Like, this computer wouldn't forcibly zap them into a world. The puppets would get lured into it instead. So this is when the red guy meets his fate. What happens is the red guy finds out this is starting to unravel and something new is starting to be formed. A new version of themselves, but it's much cheaper, it's much weaker. So whatever is happening, they're not going to really survive it. Something is getting ripped apart here, and they're not going to get out of this alive. So when his head explodes, that's the world basically kicking him out. Like, okay, you found out way too much, you're gone. It doesn't kill him like I guess the world expected. It sends him into another type of show. We find out in the 6th episode what exactly happened to him, but we see hints of it in the 5th as well. He's basically in a more adult show. He is an adult character, technically. He was a college-age student, so now he's graduated college, and now he's working in an office. He has an adult job with all these other adults, and they all look like him. This is like the the world's way of containing that threat, because the world at this point wants to unravel. It just wants to die. The next threat is the bird. The bird is starting to notice that something is wrong. This isn't how it's supposed to work. And the 5th episode is where he starts noticing this. He starts flipping out, freaking out. He's telling the singers and dancers to go away. And they're not even, like, acknowledging what lesson's supposed to have or something. He's like, something's missing. The boy's noticing something. The boy notices something's missing. The bird's noticing something's wrong. And the boy goes, well, is it that guy? It's like a piece of bread banging on food in a fairly rhythmic, kind of cool way. You know, I kind of like the little scat thing it was doing. It just kind of takes over to distract, and nobody asked about this. Nobody's even eating anything. Nobody's dealing with this at this point. Like, all the other teachers, something came up that provoked it, that the lesson would have been there with the question. I mean, the butterfly came when the boy is upset. The computer popped up when they were asking a question. It still popped up at an appropriate time. It was just the wrong teacher. The notebook was the only other one who popped up without any reason, but the puppets figured they just forgot their lines. So, okay, we'll wing it. Or maybe it assumed they were bored. They weren't doing anything. And the clock popped up as part of the show. Something was supposed to happen, but nothing was supposed to happen at this dinner. This dinner was like a mini cool down period before the bedtime part. Like, this is where they would talk about, oh, well, did you do this today? Or it would show it would do something other than like a pure lesson. It would do like maybe reader mail or something. Meanwhile, through all this, the father is popping up and watching and keeping an eye on this, wondering what is going on. Because the father doesn't, like, the world and the father, Roy, are at odds, I think. The world wants to unravel, it wants to die, it wants to fade away. Its time is up, according to it. But he doesn't want that, and he's still trying to keep it going, pushing it, advertising it, that sort of thing. So you can kind of see what I'm saying here. It's like a bit of a push between the creator and the creation of when the creation will die. We're seeing, like I said, we're seeing a world's death throes, basically. So the boy is still going along with it. He's like, oh, food's talking. This is silly. Like he's still kind of going along with it. He's not really picking, because he's still young. Like, he's starting to pick up something is wrong, but he's not picking it up completely yet. Because this is like basically the equivalent of a 4-year-old, you know. Sometimes it takes a little while for a 4-year-old to figure out something ain't right. And sometimes they pick up on it instantly. Either way, when they pick up on it, they pick up on it. And I'll explain that in a second, because again, I did see the 6th episode, and that kind of proves that part of the theory. But the bird is fighting back. He's pushing him away. He's saying, leave me alone, go away. And the red guy is trying to tell them the world is falling apart. Find a way out. At this point, the red guy actually thinks he found a way out. Because, you know, he's in a different world. He's not going to get destroyed, essentially. So he's trying to warn them to get them out of there. So the bird is the only one picking up this phone that keeps popping up, the red phone, trying to get the warning, but the world sees what both the red guy and the bird are doing, and knows that because it wants to wipe everything of itself out. It knew it couldn't do that with the red guy, but it can do that with the bird. The bird isn't as physically strong, and it has a more brutal way of taking care of it. It basically sends the bird into a hospital type show and kills him. Just rips out his organs, like he's in a horror show, basically. Just rips him apart. And force feeds it to the boy. So the boy is forced to deal with this. and he at this point he's too weak and sick to move, like, well, too weak and bloated, I should say, to move and get the phone and take the red guy's warning, which probably wouldn't have helped him in the end anyway. So the end of the 5th episode is basically the boy is left alone, and the 6th episode opens with him crying and not wanting a lesson, knowing the lessons are bad, knowing he doesn't want the lessons, knowing he doesn't want to deal with the lessons, knowing he just wants his friends back. This is where I said when a 4-year-old figures out something's wrong, it hits them hard. He's saying goodnight to them when he knows they're not there, and he's crying. He doesn't want to sleep. He's starting to fight back, but he can't. This world is torturing him, and he cannot fight back, and this is like the final hours of this world. This world is basically going to get ripped apart some way, somehow. And the thing is, any world connected to it will too. So the world the red guy is in is actually a very temporary world, and he's gonna break it. Because we switch to his perspective, and he's starting to miss his home, his old world. He's missing his pseudo little brother. He misses his grandfatherly figure. He misses even Roy. Meanwhile, basically, this world's trying to kill the little yellow boy. It's trying to kill him. But the red guy starts trying to inject his old world into the new one, and it kind of breaks it. It basically, rips it apart even more. So now he's behind the scenes, and he sees basically the control panel for this world, the actual world he comes from. And what does he do? What does anyone do when they're in a weird room full of buttons and there's no one to stop you? You start pushing things. And he starts seeing all these teachers getting summoned, including ones that would have been in later episodes, talking about different things. Meanwhile, the creator is reaching out and trying to stop the red guy. Essentially, what the red guy is doing is he's trying to fix the world. He's trying to... because he realizes what it is, and he's trying to see if there's a way to stop it from breaking down. What if I push this button? What if I shut this button? Shut this down? How do I turn this teacher off? How do I do this? How do I do that? So, and Roy is trying to stop him because he's making it worse. He's breaking him more because he doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know how to operate the machine. And this is when the red guy realizes that he can't fix it, and he's gonna have to kill his friend, basically. By doing so, he will kill Roy. The bird's already dead, but he would have killed the bird. He's going to kill himself. He's committing a suicide to speed the end of this world by unplugging the machine. Basically causing a big collapse. But the cycle continues. The lights flicker on. New characters, new house. And the calendar changes to June 20th. There is a new kids show. The Notebook pops up again. And now we're left to question, is this another kids show on its last legs and about to deteriorate, just like the one we just saw? Or is this a new beginning and things are going to be a little saner for a few years at least? That's what I think the overarching superficial plot... Wow, I can't talk anymore. The overarching superficial plot is. Now, I'm not saying the other theories about how media is in the real world that aren't valid. In fact, that actually just adds layers to it and is very much a part of it. But no, I'm always sad to never see anyone talk about what the story is. The actual story of this is. Not the meaning, not the reasoning behind it, but the actual story itself. And this is kind of the best I've got for it, because there's not a lot talking about it. And it does feel like a world in its death throes, basically, especially towards the middle and the end. This world is basically a deteriorating mess. and there's nothing you can do about it. And it's kind of depressing when you think about it. Is this is the inevitable end of a series, the end of a show. This is basically its finale, only very unceremonious. It's living seasonal rot, essentially. Not the series itself, but this is basically the living embodiment of seasonal rot for a television show. This is what it feels, seasonal rot feels like to a lot of people. Ask anyone who were huge fans of SpongeBob back in the day. They feel like the show is now in a seasonal rot period, and this is what it's like to them. Only a much slower process. This is a few years worth of seasonal rot in a freaking day. And it's a very scary thought when you think about it, that this show has become, like, who knows how the show was before this seasonal rot, because obviously this, we only see the last episode, essentially, through 6 episodes of the Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. I know this sounds very weird, but metaphorically speaking. So this is a very interesting little thing I've been thinking about. Like, I even had the theory for years. People would be saying, oh, you know, it's like a different June 19th every time. It's like June 19th of the year the show was made, blah, blah, blah. But I always had the theory that the whole thing was taking place over the course of a day. It's just we were seeing different parts of the day, and once the show was over, the calendar would turn and be June 20th. And that final scene in 6 completely confirmed it for me, which kind of made me smile that I kind of saw that coming. I've been doing good with that lately. I'll explain later. So, but yeah, this is my little theory on a piece of Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. If you want to see like the actual meaning behind it, there are a lot of people that talk about it. I just wanted to talk about how I think it's kind of just seasonal rot, the series, in a weird way, in how this is basically a kid's show that is in a post-apocalyptic, well, actually no, pre-apocalyptic, sorry, a pre-apocalyptic situation, and it's basically about to die. So I'll catch you guys later. Bye.